looking back, a couple of elements, philosophically speaking, you suddenly realize that as a private in a infantry company, you were expendable, number one. Number two, looking back over time, no one needed those mountains. There was nothing there. It was just that we were tying up that number of divisions. That's all.
What do you think were the lessons learned from the 10th Mountain Division battle in Italy?
Well, I think the military learned a lot about the fighting in mountains. I think that's, even though we no longer have skis and that sort of thing, and no longer have mules because you have helicopters, to move your stuff. I think the 10th, as it stands now, still uses some of those lessons that we learned about the vulnerability of fighting in the mountains, the difficulty of moving men and equipment in the mountains. I think all of that were valuable lessons. And I think, of course, wars are changing. They're much shorter. There's a lot more devastation that can be, brought on with these superior weapons. On the other hand, in Iraq, you couldn't use any, atomic artillery shells or anything like that. They're pretty much still foot soldiers. And even though they had, heavy equipment in front of them, they still, lost some people. But I think they learned, speed and, a lot of discussion about did we have enough men, enough firepower, and so on, because that's key. Well, as it turned out, it was enough. Whether or not it's enough men to occupy Iraq is another matter. But at the time, to do what we had to do, there was enough. So I think, each war, they sure document everything, and they have war colleges, and they study all this stuff over and over again. I think maybe the Army was surprised by our ability to do as much as we did at the time. I would like to believe that, and what you read about it is, how did this happen? How did these guys do this, And I still maintain that it was a combination of our training and our fitness that carried the day as much as anything. And clearly being able to, even though that was the only time we ever really used our mountain climbing experience, was on Riva Ridge. Nevertheless, that was the key to Belvedere, at least at the time. So I think we learned a lot about the value of mountain troops. And well, they still have the 10th. It was reactivated, of course. Now, you want to ask me about the officers?
Yeah, I want to ask you if you had any comments about the general quality of the officers.
I thought they were very good. We didn't have any. We lost a couple of officers, by the way. Of course, the second lieutenants that were in charge of each platoon, they were out in front a lot, and they took a lot of hits. And our guys never ever shirked. They were right there. And although I can't remember, the names are vaguely familiar now, but I remember one chap, Lieutenant Hawk, who was particularly aggressive and brave and out in front, and I think he was killed. I'd have to check, but I'm pretty sure he's one of those that was killed. I remember Lieutenant Penrose, who's mentioned in the book, who was in the 87th, and he was wounded. He wasn't killed. But anyway, I had nothing with at that time, because you got to remember we're 20-year-old guys and we don't think in those terms. But there was, if I tell you, if the guys weren't leading us and being out front and center, we would have known it, and we would have had some reaction to that. And in retrospect, clearly they were really good, really great. Now I've heard a story about one of the company commanders in, what is it, the 85th or 86th? Who's that guy that it was written up in green cognac about the guy that led the patrol that Marasco was killed on.
Oh. He was on the trip.
He was on the trip, heavy glasses and so on.
Yeah.
There was some question, and certainly the guy that wrote Green Cognac, his name was Putnam or something. He really laced into him about being indecisive and getting out of there when he shouldn't have, and not accomplishing the mission, and so on and so forth. But it was rather sad because this fellow was alone most of the trip. I don't know if you noticed that. And he always looked rather quizzical, like he was thinking about something, but not much. But he was at every function, you know. And whereas a lot of people were kind of almost ridiculing him, you know, I don't know if we have that much evidence, and maybe he's to be felt sorry for rather than, you know. And I felt rather badly for him, you know. I forget his name already.
You know,
What did they call him? They had I had nothing but the highest regard.
is his name Hugh Majors?
Well, Hugh Majors was the guy that was wounded.
Oh, that's right. Okay. He was the replacement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I guess it's not that important that we pick it up, but here, you better take that back.
Can you think of anything else that you'll wish later on we talked about? I've covered everything that I was going to cover. Okay, a lot more.
No, because I don't know where you're going with this. Talked about everything that's important. I don't think you know, war stories embellish or enhance anything. One thing that I do remember was kind of fun was, and no one has written about this, and maybe in the book Green Cognac they've written about it, but I haven't read that book, and maybe you can help me on this. But someone somewhere uncovered a warehouse full of cognac. And for a period of a couple of days there, we were probably the drunkest division in all of Italy.
I did hear this story. And you know what I heard? I heard it wasn't cognac. I heard it was vermouth.
Very, very. It was very high, very nice people. And they all were respectful of one another, and they all were reasonably intelligent. I mean, there wasn't a bunch of, but maybe the whole army was that way. They didn't take a bunch of jerks. I think they tried to take some pretty good young people. I don't know. I only have one experience.
But I think the quality was high.
But I was glad I went. As I said, it was a little bit of closure, not in the sense of, you know, in a negative sense, but just it was good to see everything go back, and I was very pleased with the affluence of the whole area compared to when we were there, and how neat and how clean, and it just was very nice.
Well, it gave you a feeling that they had some positive